Phantom Carnival, the twilight arrival. I first noticed it on a night when the moon was just a silver sliver in the sky, like a dying lantern on the brink of extinguishing. I was out on my nightly walk through the desolate farmlands behind my house. The wind was oddly still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, in the distance, I saw lights flickering, colorful, unearthly lights that twirled and sparkled on the horizon. I thought my eyes were playing tricks, maybe some reflection of distant headlights, but as I approached, the colors danced higher, forming the unmistakable shape of a glowing Ferris wheel. I felt compelled to follow the light, my heart pounding with equal measures of curiosity and fear. There should have been nothing there, just fields and empty roads. Yet, the hush of the air parted to reveal cheery carnival music, distant laughter, and the unmistakable jingle of a carousel. From out of nowhere, the carnival appeared as if it had materialized in a forgotten clearing that normally stood barren and silent. I hesitated at the rusted gate, feeling as though I'd crossed some invisible threshold between what was real and what should never be. The gate creaked open, so I stepped inside. Rows of booths, bizarre rides, and swirling neon signs stood as if they'd always been there. But there was no crowd. In fact, I saw no one at all, only the buzzing swirl of lights and the faint echo of calliope tunes. Like a dream I couldn't wake from, I felt drawn in deeper. My instincts screamed to run, but curiosity shackled me. Little did I know, this was merely the beginning of a nightmare I would carry with me for the rest of my days. Whispers in the air. I found myself wandering past stands filled with what looked like carnival prizes. Oversized plush creatures with unnatural grins, porcelain dolls with unblinking glassy eyes, and rows upon rows of glowing trinkets. Their neon edges pulsed in time to the distant throb of old-time carnival music. I heard something odd beneath that bright melody, though, a persistent whisper, like voices in a language I couldn't quite grasp. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud against the cracked pavement. Each time my shoe struck the ground, I flinched, half expecting someone, or something, to jump out from behind a booth. But the carnival remained eerily empty. I approached a booth labeled Fortune's Eye, expecting a fortune teller or at least a mechanical automaton with a crystal ball. Inside, there was just a single mirror. As I peered into it, a frigid wind seemed to blow from behind, making the hair on my arms stand on end. Within the glass, I caught movement that didn't correspond to my reflection. It was a flicker, like someone passing quickly behind me. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. No one. Yet, I was certain I had seen a figure. A tall silhouette with impossibly thin limbs, wearing a tattered top hat. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. Just the wind picking up, whistling through the empty booths. The music stuttered, warping in pitch, and for a moment, I thought I heard a soft laugh snaking through the air. The Painted Lady. I turned a corner and came across a ride I'd never seen before. The Painted Lady. The sign above it depicted a haunting face of a woman, her cheeks cracked with old paint, eyes hollow. It seemed to be some mix of a carousel and a haunted house attraction. I saw wooden horses fixed to a rotating platform, each carved with expressions of agony instead of whimsy. It was lit from within by a single flickering lantern, casting a weak orange glow that swayed with the breeze. The air smelled of mildew and old wood, as if the ride had been locked away for decades. Against all reason, I stepped onto the platform. As I did, the ride started by itself. The wooden horses bobbed, and the Painted Lady began to spin. At first, it was a lazy circle, but soon the rotation grew faster. The lantern flickered out, plunging me into near total darkness, except for the fleeting streaks of carnival lights outside. My hands clutched the brass pole of the wooden horse I was perched on, knuckles white. I tried to step off, but the centrifugal force pinned me. The Painted Lady sped up further, and that faint whispering I'd heard before returned. Only now it was louder, swirling around me in malevolent echoes. In the strobing light of the carnival's neon signs, the horse's expression seemed to shift, its eyes rolling in terror or delight. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the ride ground to a halt. I toppled off, stumbling to the ground. My vision swam, and I could swear I saw that tall figure in the top hat watching me from the carnival center. Unseen observers. Beneath the glare of the funhouse mirrors and swirling lights, my fear morphed into desperation. I needed to find someone, anyone, else in this twisted place. As if in answer, I heard a faint sobbing, leading me toward a row of dilapidated sideshow tents. The sobs were faint, muffled, yet they pulled me forward with inexplicable urgency. One tent had a hand-painted sign that read Madame Zora's Menagerie. The entrance flap was half open, tattered along the edges. Inside, cages stood in eerie silence. They were meant to house exotic or bizarre creatures, but I saw only darkness within them. The sobbing was louder here, echoing against the canvas walls. I followed the sound to the far corner. That's where I saw her. A teenage girl dressed in ragged carnival attire. Striped leggings, a shabby jacket, streaks of makeup smeared on her cheeks. She was crouched in a corner, her back to me, shoulders shaking. When I gently placed a hand on her shoulder, she spun around with wild eyes. She whispered, "He's still here. Don't let him see you." "Who?" I asked, my voice tight. She only shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then she started repeating something under her breath, an incantation or a desperate prayer. Before I could press further, we both froze at the creak of footsteps right outside the tent. Shadow shapes flickered against the canvas. I held my breath, and the girl closed her eyes tightly, as if that could shield her from what lurked just beyond the tent flap. Moments later, the footsteps receded, and I exhaled shakily. I turned back to the girl, but she was gone, as though she had never been there to begin with. Game of temptations. I emerged from the menagerie tent, my skin crawling with dread. The lights of the carnival seemed dimmer now, as if the place was slowly swallowing its own brilliance. My feet dragged me past a row of midway games. The signage above each booth was cartoonish, depicting exaggerated grins and winking faces. But something about those smiles looked wrong. Too wide, too hungry. Suddenly, an overhead spotlight ignited above one booth, revealing a figure leaning casually against the counter. He was a lanky man wearing pinstripe trousers and a vest, his face partly concealed by a battered top hat. He gestured at me with long, pale fingers. "Care to play?" he asked. His voice was a velvet hush, carrying effortlessly over the silence. I swallowed hard. My throat felt scratchy, my heart pounding. "Play what?" He spread his arms, indicating the booth's game. Rings stacked near an array of bottles. Ring toss, classic fun. But here, the prizes are far beyond ordinary. No one else was around, yet I could hear phantom applause and cheers, as if a crowd was urging me on. A chill prickled my spine. Against my better judgment, I took a ring from the man's outstretched hand. The metal felt warm, pulsing like a living thing. I tossed it, feeling an odd surge of energy. The ring glided through the air in slow motion, then settled neatly onto one of the bottles. A distorted carnival jingle erupted. The man clapped, lips curving into a too-wide grin. "You win," he said, and handed me a small box. Before I could protest, he vanished. One moment there, the next gone. I stared down at the box. My name was written on it in red ink. Fear slithered in my gut. The box's secret. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was alive inside that box. It was small, about the size of a deck of cards, tied neatly with a black ribbon. My name glimmered in fluid script across the top, still wet as though it had just been penned. I wanted to throw it away, to be rid of it, but a magnetic pull urged me to open it. Inside was a single porcelain eye, painted with unnerving detail. Blue iris, a dark pupil, blood vessels etched like spiderwebs. My stomach lurched. Why this? Suddenly, the eye blinked. I dropped the box with a yelp, stumbling backward. When I mustered the courage to lift the box again, the porcelain eye was still. Must have been my own imagination, I told myself, though every nerve in my body screamed otherwise. I closed the lid, tying the ribbon in place. My eyes scanned the deserted midway. The ride lights flickered, and the carnival music warbled, as if playing from a damaged record. I stuffed the box in my jacket pocket, simultaneously repulsed by it and oddly protective. Something told me it was the key to surviving the night, or a curse that would follow me long after dawn. Either way, my only option was to keep going. The maze of mirrors. Desperate for answers, I headed toward the largest structure at the center of the carnival grounds, a sprawling mirror maze. Its entrance was a swirling vortex design, the colors seeming to shift every time I blinked. A red neon sign flickered above the arch. Reflections. The electric hum accompanied each flicker like a heartbeat, thrumming inside my skull. I stepped inside, expecting the usual illusions of glass corridors. Instead, the mirrors were tinted, as if covered by a thin film. My reflection looked pale and drawn, eyes sunken. The corridors twisted and branched without rhyme or reason. I tried to retrace my steps, but I only ended up deeper in the labyrinth, seeing infinite versions of myself glancing back from 1,000 angles. A hush blanketed the maze, broken only by the steady drip of some unseen liquid. Every now and then, I'd glimpse something that wasn't me in the reflection. Maybe the silhouette of that top-hatted figure, or the teenage girl from earlier, her eyes wide with silent terror. But every time I whirled around, I found only empty corridors. Minutes stretched into eternity, and I lost all sense of direction. My mind churned with rising panic. At last, I found an exit sign glowing weakly at the end of one corridor. I sprinted toward it, ignoring the disorienting swirl of mirrors. As I reached the sign, the corridor's last mirror shattered spontaneously, raining shards around me. In each fragment, I saw a fleeting image. My face twisted in a silent scream. Then it was gone, leaving me trembling at the threshold back into the carnival. I stepped out, relieved to see the open air, but the carnival's grounds felt more claustrophobic than ever. Allies in darkness. Outside the mirror maze, the carnival had changed. The once lively lights were dimmer, and the swirling music was interspersed with strange static. The place felt alive, like a slumbering beast stirring in its own gloom. I caught movement at the corner of my vision, a flash of striped leggings and messy hair. It was the teenage girl again, darting behind a booth. I followed her, careful not to lose sight. To my relief, she didn't vanish this time. Instead, she stopped in a shadowed alley between two game tents. She beckoned me closer. She spoke in hushed tones. It's called the Phantom Carnival. It appears at midnight and disappears by daybreak. Anyone who enters risks nightmares or worse. I swallowed. Then why are you here? She glanced over her shoulder, as though afraid to speak. I was lured in. I can't leave until... She paused, her eyes drifting toward my jacket pocket. You have one of the gifts, don't you? I nodded. My hand reflexively touched the box containing the porcelain eye. She grimaced. He gives them to those he marks. I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded, dread pooling in her gaze. The Ringmaster, or the Carnival Master, nobody's sure. But he's the one who keeps this place tethered to our realm. Her voice trembled. If you want out, if we both want out, you'll have to learn the carnival's secrets before dawn. If we fail, we become part of it forever. The Ferris wheel of fears. With the girl, whose name I learned was Lily, by my side, we navigated the carnival's winding paths. She seemed to know certain safe routes, avoiding the more sinister rides. But soon, our path led us to the Ferris wheel I'd seen from afar, the one that had initially drawn me in. Lily hesitated. This ride shows you your greatest fear. Survive it, and you might gain a clue about how to break the carnival's grip. I stared up at the towering structure. That's if we survive. She swallowed and nodded. We climbed into one of the creaking gondolas. Immediately, the wheel lurched into motion, ascending us into the night sky. The carnival below looked like a sprawling tapestry of neon illusions, flickering with otherworldly energy. Then, without warning, my surroundings shifted. I wasn't in the gondola anymore. I was in a hospital corridor. My father lay in a bed at the far end of the hallway, respirator hissing. I'd been here years ago when he passed, but this was more vivid than any memory. My chest tightened, Tears pricked my eyes. I tried to reach him, but the hallway stretched infinitely, the lights flickering overhead. No matter how fast I ran, I couldn't get closer. His voice echoed around me, calling my name, suffused with sorrow and regret. It was the worst kind of hopelessness, an unending nightmare. A tortured sob escaped my lips. This isn't real, I told myself, but it felt painfully real. If I gave in to the despair, I would be trapped. I closed my eyes and forced myself to remember where I truly was, on the Ferris wheel in the Phantom Carnival. When I opened my eyes, the vision cracked like shattered glass. I gasped for breath, back in the gondola. Lily was next to me, eyes shut tight as tears streamed down her face. She had her own horrors to confront. We clung to each other, and the Ferris wheel slowly descended. The price of admission. The Ferris wheel came to a stop, leaving us shaken and pale. Lily wiped her tears, her eyes distant. She didn't tell me what she'd seen, and I didn't ask. It was enough to know that the carnival was using our deepest fears to weaken us. But as Lily had mentioned, surviving the ride might reveal clues. The lights around the Ferris wheel flickered ominously. A faint imprint of words glowed at the base. Confess and break the illusion. It disappeared almost as quickly as it came. Whether it was a genuine clue or just another carnival trick, we couldn't be sure. We staggered off the platform. Lily's voice was strained. The carnival feeds on regret, fear, and guilt. That's how it keeps us trapped, fueling its existence. We have to find a way to strip it of that power. How? I whispered. She paused, glancing around. There might be a story behind it, a history of how it started. Maybe in the main tent or the Ringmaster's trailer. If we dig deeper, we might learn its weakness. Another overhead light buzzed and popped, showering sparks onto the walkway. The Phantom Carnival was like a living organism, responding to our every move. Time felt dangerously short. Dawn was still hours away, but I sensed the carnival's hold tightening with every second that passed. The sinister sideshow. We headed toward the largest tent at the carnival center, which Lily believed to be the main performance area. On the way, we passed a row of sideshow attractions, each more unsettling than the last. Posters promised sights of the boneless man, the two-headed clown, and Madame Zora, mistress of souls. The canvas walls rustled, and from within, I heard faint moans, scraping sounds, and occasional shrieks. I looked at Lily. You think there's something to learn inside those tents? She bit her lip, eyes brimming with reluctance. Only nightmares, but maybe the nightmares hold truth. We chose a tent at random. The boneless man inside, the stench of decay and mold clung to every surface. A single spotlight revealed a stage where a glass container stood. First, it appeared empty. Then, with sickening fluidity, a shape slithered upward. An emaciated man with limbs too long and no solid structure. He pressed his face against the glass, eyes bulging as if pleading for release. For a moment, our gazes locked, and I sensed he was once human, trapped here, contorted by the carnival's dark magic. Then the lights flickered, and he was gone, leaving only an echo of wet slithering. I suppressed a shudder. The carnival seemed to thrive on torturing souls, warping them into attractions. Stepping back outside, Lily and I locked eyes. There was no help to be found in these sideshows, only a brutal reminder of what might happen to us if we failed to break the carnival's curse. Within the main tent, at last we stood before the colossal big-top tent. Its stripes had faded from bright reds and whites to a dull, dirty pink and gray, like old flesh. A large banner hung at the entrance. Midnight extravaganza, all are welcome. It fluttered despite the lack of any discernible breeze. With a deep breath, we stepped inside. Rows of benches encircled a central stage. The tent was as large as a cathedral from within, defying the laws of space. Torn banners and streamers swayed overhead. The ring smelled of sawdust, sweat, and something metallic, blood, perhaps. Suddenly, spotlights crashed on, one by one, illuminating the center stage. A swirl of dust sparkled in the harsh beams. A disembodied voice boomed from overhead, ladies and gentlemen, and all lost souls. Welcome to the greatest show beyond earthly bounds. I recognized the voice instantly. It was the man from the ring toss booth, the one in the top hat. Lily and I exchanged tense glances, creeping toward the ring. The overhead lights shifted, and a figure emerged into the spotlight. Tall, impossibly thin, top hat perched precariously on his head, his face obscured by shadows. He bowed dramatically. Tonight's performance, he said, features a daring attempt to escape one's own destiny. Will they break the carnival's hold, or become part of our family forever? His voice dripped with mockery and glee. The Ringmaster's game. The Ringmaster snapped his fingers, and ropes descended from above, each knotted into a noose. Pick one, he said, his grin visible even though most of his face was in shadow. My blood ran cold. Lily stepped closer to me. Don't, she whispered. It's a trick. I glared at the Ringmaster. We want out. We know there's a way. Tell us how. He laughed softly. Oh, there is always a way out. But freedom comes at a price. He gestured to the nooses. These are but symbols. Your regrets, your fears, your secrets you try so desperately to hide. Confess them, or be choked by them forever. A sickening silence filled the tent. My mind roiled with guilt over the countless things I'd buried deep inside, from my failures to my father's death. I could almost feel the nooses growing tighter around my throat as those memories flooded back. Before I could speak, Lily startled me by stepping forward. In a trembling voice, she confessed her darkest regret, a betrayal of a friend she'd never forgiven herself for. As she spoke, one of the nooses disintegrated into dust. The Ringmaster clapped slowly, one chain broken. But there are many more. His gaze turned to me. My heart pounded as I tried to find the words. Any words. The Ringmaster merely smirked, as though certain I would fail. My burden unveiled. Tears pooled in my eyes, and my throat felt like it was closing off. Still, I managed to speak. My greatest regret was leaving my father alone in his final moments, driving away in anger after a bitter argument. He passed away the next day, and I never got to say goodbye. I carried that guilt like a weight chained to my soul, gnawing at me every day since. As the words left my lips, another noose disintegrated. I gasped in relief, my shoulders trembling. The Ringmaster tapped his cane against the floor, his grin stretching wider. 2 chains broken, he murmured. But the carnival is not so easily escaped. The overhead lights dimmed. The Ringmaster approached, each step echoing in the silent tent. Standing before me, he reached up and touched the brim of his hat. Tell me, he whispered, why were you chosen to receive the carnival's gift? He gestured at the box in my pocket. I felt its weight as if it were made of lead. I don't know. He studied me for a moment. In time, you will, he said cryptically. Then he vanished in a swirl of flickering lights, leaving Lily and me alone in the big top. The nooses that remained swung gently in the darkness. A moment of respite. Exhausted from the confessions and the constant terror, Lily and I sought a quiet corner behind a stack of old crates near the tent's edge. Cobwebs clung to the overhead beams, and the distant hum of the carnival's rides seemed far away, like a storm gathering on the horizon. For a moment, we allowed ourselves to rest. My heart still drummed in my ears, and Lily's breathing was ragged. She confided that she had been here once before, years ago, yet she'd blocked most of the memories. This time, she'd been lured back by a letter that simply read, "We still have your debt to settle." She came in search of closure, but found only more torment. I showed her the porcelain eye. She recoiled at first, then took it gingerly in her hand. "It's watching you," she murmured. A shiver coursed through me. "It blinked," I said, my voice almost too low to hear. We both understood that everything within this carnival served a purpose. The porcelain eye was a puzzle piece, but how it fit into the bigger picture remained elusive. Before we could discuss it further, a distant scream pierced the air, reminding us that this was no place for solace. We had to keep moving to find whatever truth would set us free. The defiled carousel. Our next destination was a small corner of the carnival we hadn't yet explored, dominated by a warped carousel. The horses were sculpted in disturbing poses, mouths open in silent screams, their eyes hollow. Tattered carnival flags dripped from the rafters like old bandages. The air smelled of burnt sugar and rancid meat. We hesitated, but a peculiar glimmer caught my eye. One of the carousel horses wore a necklace bearing a small key. Its eyes seemed to follow my every move. Lily and I exchanged looks. We needed that key, but the ride felt like a trap. Cautiously, we stepped onto the rotating platform. The moment we did, the carousel lurched into motion, picking up speed far too quickly. The overhead lights flickered, revealing a horrifying sight. The horses' wooden flesh peeled back, exposing writhing sinews and bones that weren't actually wood at all. They neighed in ghostly chorus, shrill and maddening. I reached for the necklace, straining against the centrifugal force. My fingertips brushed the key, but the horse twisted away, as if alive. Lily tried to grab it from the other side, nearly losing her balance. Her foot slipped, and she shrieked. At the last second, I managed to hook my arm around the brass pole, holding her steady. Summoning what little courage I had left, I lunged for the necklace again. This time, I grabbed the key and yanked. The chain snapped, and I held the prize in my shaking hand. Instantly, the carousel shrieked in protest, then ground to a violent halt, sending both of us sprawling onto the platform. Confrontation with nightmares. Key in hand, we slipped away from the carousel's macabre circle. The entire carnival seemed to quake. Rides rattled, lights flickered. The Ringmaster's laughter echoed over the loudspeakers. "You're almost there," it said, "but can you face what comes next?" Dark shapes slithered along the edges of the midway. Grotesque figures with half-formed faces peered from behind booths, their eyes hungry and inquisitive. The Phantom Carnival was unleashing its final horrors to break our resolve. Lily and I pressed on, weaving through twisted pathways. A clown with a grin that stretched ear to ear emerged from the shadows, arms elongated and twitching. We sprinted away, the clown's laughter rising to a feverish pitch. Everywhere we turned, the carnival's nightmares lurked, driving us toward one final destination: the Ringmaster's private trailer. It was parked at the edge of the fairgrounds, partially hidden by swirling mists that clung to the ground like living fog. The trailer's door was old and wooden, carved with arcane symbols. A heavy lock glinted in the faint light, perfectly matching the key we'd just found. I glanced at Lily, who nodded. Our eyes were tired but determined. With trembling hands, I slipped the key into the lock. A soft click sounded, and the door creaked open. The heart of the carnival. Inside, the trailer was larger than it appeared from the outside. Candles flickered on antique furniture. A massive desk stood in the center, strewn with scrolls, books, and bizarre trinkets. Stuffed ravens, jars of glowing liquid, and faded photographs of carnival performers. The walls were covered with diagrams, star charts, and elaborate sketches of the rides. At the far end of the room, a single black curtain concealed something tall and narrow. Drawn by a sense of inevitability, I crossed the room and swept the curtain aside. Behind it stood an ornate standing mirror, its frame carved with swirling patterns. In the glass, I didn't see my reflection. Instead, I saw the Ringmaster's face, expressionless. Lily rifled through the desk, uncovering an old journal with the carnival's name on the cover. She flipped through the pages. The entries spoke of a traveling show that made a pact with a dark entity for success and immortality. In return, it had to feed on the fears and regrets of those who entered. The Ringmaster was no mere man. He was the embodiment of that dark bargain. "Here," Lily said, pointing to a passage. "It says the carnival can only be banished if the reflection of its master is shattered by those who confess their sins and confront their nightmares." We stared at the mirror, at the Ringmaster's reflection. Our confessions on the stage, the rides that forced us to face our fears. Everything was aligning. Now, we just had to break the reflection. Breaking the reflection. Lily and I carefully positioned ourselves before the mirror. The Ringmaster's image glowered, trapped yet smug. The air in the trailer turned freezing, our breath steaming as we exhaled. A sudden gust extinguished the candles, leaving the room flickering in the dim glow from the carnival lights outside. We recalled the instructions. Only those who had faced their fears could break the master's hold. Lily and I had confessed, endured the terror rides. We had proven our resolve. Now we needed an object to strike the mirror. My eyes fell on a small hammer lying among the Ringmaster's trinkets. A ceremonial piece with etched runes. My stomach nodded. Would it work? My hand shook as I lifted the hammer. The Ringmaster's reflection shifted, as though he was trying to speak. An echo of his voice filled the trailer. You will never be free. I raised the hammer, heart pounding. We choose freedom, I hissed, then brought the hammer down on the glass. A blinding flash of light exploded outward. The mirror cracked, long fissures branching like lightning bolts. The Ringmaster's scream reverberated through the trailer. For a moment I thought we'd done it, but the mirror hadn't fully shattered. It held together by a final thread of silver, the Ringmaster's eye still glaring at us. Lily grabbed the porcelain eye from my pocket and hurled it at the mirror. The porcelain eye struck the final unbroken piece of glass, and the mirror exploded into shards. Sunrise and shadows. A deafening silence followed the mirror's destruction. The trailer went dark, as if the energy sustaining it had evaporated. Lily and I tumbled outside, nearly blinded by the first threads of dawn peeling back the night sky. The carnival, once so vibrant in its terrible glory, began to disintegrate around us. Rides collapsed into dust, lights fizzled out with sparks and dying flickers, and the eerie music slowed to a final, drawn-out groan. We stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the Phantom Carnival vanish like smoke in the rising sun. The Ferris wheel crumbled, scattering into the wind. Booths, tents, and twisted attractions melted away, leaving only the barren field. It was as if it had never been there at all. Exhausted, Lily and I exchanged a look of gratitude and shared sorrow for what we had endured. She quietly told me she would try to live her life without the weight of her past regret, and I nodded, tears warming my cheeks. I, too, felt a strange sense of peace, like a wound finally given a chance to heal. As the sun climbed higher, Lily and I parted ways, each determined to carry our newfound freedom into whatever future awaited us. Yet, as I walked back home, I couldn't help glancing over my shoulder at the empty field. For a split second, I thought I saw a tall figure in a top hat standing in the distance, black coat billowing in a phantom breeze. I blinked, and it was gone. Still, on nights when the moon is a sliver in the sky, I swear I hear carnival music drifting on the wind. A whisper of calliope tunes singing a melody of secrets, regret, and invitation. Because some nightmares can't be entirely banished. They linger at the edges of our reality, waiting for us to slip, to give in to our fears. And when we do, the Phantom Carnival will be there, spinning its lights against the darkness, ready to offer one more ride.